is right in the church today. And we're not going to get too much into that today. We're going to deal with that on the 27th. So if y'all want to see that, y'all going to come and see that next. But we're going to show you something strong nonetheless. So let's take a look at this thing. Because they're always trying to cut the map up and take Egypt out of Africa, put it in the Middle East. If that's the Middle East, where's the Middle West? But here you can see Kemet sitting right here in Africa. The Nile River, 4,100 miles in length, starting in Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Zaire, surrounding the Great Lakes region, which is the source of the Nile, flowing down 4,100 miles through the Sudan, right through Ethiopia, on through Kemet or Egypt, and empties right into the Mediterranean. But they cut it right out of Africa and set us in the Middle East. Anwar Sadat, when he became president, Jimmy Carter went over there and saw him and said, "Gee, I didn't realize you were so dark." This is what Carter said. And Carter said to him, "I'm the first pharaoh in 2,000 years." That's what he said. He said he's the first black person, first Nubian to return to the throne of Kemet in 2,000 years. And every time he came to America, he came and visited black folk before he went to the capital. You see why he didn't live too long. We move on. So you can see here the Nile begins where the ancient Egyptians said in heaven. They call this land the Ta-Neter land. Ta is land and Neter is God. The God's land. They call it Pone or Punt. The ancient land where the ancient ancestors and the gods came from. This was an intermediary boundary where the world of the living communed with the world of the departed. People who lived in this particular area were considered to be the spiritual ancestors, the spiritual contact with the ancestors. The ancient Egyptians sent pilgrimages back to this land to replenish their own kingdom, and we're going to show you how they did that. But this place they called heaven. This was called the primeval hill of the beginning. As you see the mountains here, as you come up, you come into the highlands in Africa. This was the summit of the earth. The equator splits Africa in half. At this particular point, this is where the sun and the sun is equal day and equal night at the equators, the vernal and autumn equinoxes. We ain't going to go into too much of that today, but suffice it to say, here you can see the story of Ptah, who rose up in the form of a primeval hill. And that time fire came and lived on top of the hill. This produced life. The geological processes in the interior of Africa, they said, produced life. See, the ignorant Europeans, they said the Egyptians had a lot of gods. They said it was a pantheon. But the ancient Egyptians, or the Kemetu, believed in the concept of one God from the very beginning. And they called the so-called gods Neter. The word Neter is where we get the word nature from. They said that before we were mortal men, we were Neters. The ignorant Europeans said that they're saying that before they were mortal men, they were gods. But what the ancient Egyptians were saying is that before we were mortal men, we were H2O, water. We were helium. We were the very silicon, the earth, yeah. The first concept of chemistry. In fact, the word chemistry comes from Kemet. The ancient Egyptians called the land Kemet. When the Arabs took over, they called it Al-Kemet. They developed a science called alchemy. And from alchemy, once they dropped the spiritual aspects of it, it became chemistry. So the first chemistry was the so-called Neters, who represented the elemental forces of nature. And the ancient Egyptians said before we were mortal men, we were the elements of nature. It's a science. They weren't worshiping a bunch of gods on the wall. It was a science. The concept of creation told in the story of Ptah. So here you can see the word Kemet means black, Nuer means black, Kemet Nu means nation, Kemetah the people. Just in case you brothers and sisters didn't think Brother Matthew was telling the truth. Here you can see here, this whole concept. I'm going to have to find that water, brother, I can't. I have to find that water. But anyway, you can see this whole concept of the primeval hill. The whole concept of the primeval hill right here. The hill rises up in the interior of Africa. There are over 40 volcanoes surrounding the Great Lakes region. And this black earth, which they call Kemet, which they showed as a form of a black burning rock, the symbol of Kemet, comes from the volcanic activity here and the equatorial winds and rains. The inundation floods bring this black land, this barren desert, which is Egypt, to give life to this barren land. Without the floods from the interior, which is called heaven, where the god Ptah sets, there could be no life in Egypt. So they saw the god Ptah, the primeval hill, the earth maker, as they call it in the Paylands, primeval Paylands. The earth maker was creating the earth and sending it to Egypt. The god was. Can you see that? Is that clear? So here's a barren desert, symbolized by Set. And this desert, you could not sustain life without this river bringing over 80 billion cubic tons of alluvium and topsoil, dropping it down into the Mediterranean. This is why the capital called Mennefer, which we call Memphis today, was dedicated to Ptah, the god, because it was here that you could see the gift of the god Tameri. Ptah is land and Mary is the born land. The gift of the land, Tameri, was deposited all over the place. And so this is where they built the monument and testimonial to Ptah in Memphis. Now see, white folks can't explain that. They can't explain that. They got to come up with some mystical, magical way of some spaceman came down and built the pyramid, or some Nordics came in from the north somewhere and built a civilization in Africa before they built one for themselves. Philanthropic white folks, we must understand that. Good-natured people. Built a civilization before they built one for themselves, left and fell in the darkness until we came back and brought them back out of it again. This is the story they tell. So you can see that because of that flooding, as the flood would come and deposit this land, the people would move up into the highlands and work on the monuments. It was a public works project. It wasn't no slaves, Jews building no pyramids. Those were craftsmen. Look at when you see the architecture of those pyramids, this was extreme craftsmanship. It was a public works project. They went into the highlands and built the pyramids because of the flooding. And they mapped out the land using instruments to determine whose land was where after the inundation subsided. That was called earth measurement, which we call today geometry. The first concept of triangulation. Triangulation was that attributed to Pythagoras? We'll answer all these questions here in a minute. As you see, geometry means the measure of land. You know Greeks measuring no land over there in those mountains up there on Mount Olympus. This is where earth measurement starts here. Pythagoras studied for 22 years in Kemet. Read Plutarch on Osiris and Isis. The Egyptians measured everything. We were obsessed with measurement and mathematics. You can see here the brothers measuring the gold. Now white folks measuring the gold. Took all the gold from us. We can't afford a little cheap gold chain. And they got jewelry stores from one in the United States, Europe, all over. South Africa or Zania, taking the gold at one time we measured because it was in our land, in Africa. Rightfully belongs to us. Measured everything, even the soul, the heart, was weighed on the scale, on the balance. You had to come before Tahuti thought, and your heart had to be just and true, as you see St. Peter's.
Now look up here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. You can't see them because they run out. But I guarantee you, this is jurors up here. And who would that be right there? The god Assad. See that? And then look who's in front of him. The god Ra. That's why my name is Asa Ra. You see? Because that's who you're looking at when you hear me. You're looking at the spiritual energy of these two great guys encapsulated in this Paul cameo. Asa Ra, Setep around my eye. You understand? Asa Ra. Setep Ra means chosen by God. God's son. Chosen by the S-U-N, son. Representing that manifestation on earth. See the scale with the Ahmed monster down there that I tell you about is half crocodile, half lion, half hyena. This is where all the doomed souls are going to go at and be devoured and tormented by this demon right here forever. And this is I think this Anubis, the jackal. We have the embalmer. And this is the scale of my eye, where your heart will be weighed against the ostrich feather. And that's the god Tahuti. He's there writing it all down. See, he got his little pen. You see, right here. My homie, my best friend Tahuti. Outside of my homie Quasar. You see? This guy's the baboon right here. They call him Thoth. That's what the Greeks call him. His real name is Tahuti. Or Jehuti. Either one is sufficient. And you can see Anu, predestinated. Anu is being brought by Anubis to have his heart weighed on the scale to see where his path will go in the afterlife. I want to show you something else too. Look at this.
They went in the highlands and built the pyramids because of the flooding.
You can build pyramids worn all the damn
using
time.
instruments to determine whose land was where after the inundation subsided.
This is where all it
That
came
was
from.
called earth measurement, which we call today geometry.
Geometry or
The
geodesy.
first concept of triangulation.
Finding
Triangulation.
the area of the
Was that
triangle.
contributed to Pythagoras? We'll answer all these questions here in a minute. As you see, geometry means the measure of land.
Geometrics.
You know Greeks measure no land over there in those mountains
In the
up
mountains.
there
Ain't
on
that
Mount
something?
Olympus. This is where earth measurement starts here. Pythagoras studied for 22 years in Kemet. Read Plutarch on Osiris and Isis. The Egyptians measured everything. We were obsessed with measurement and mathematics. You can see here the brothers measuring the gold. Now white folks measuring the gold. Took all the gold from us. We can't afford a little cheap gold chain. And they got jewelry stores from one in the United States, Europe, all over, South Africa or Zania, taking the gold at one time we measured because it was in our land, in Africa. Rightfully belongs to us. Measured everything, even the soul, the heart, was weighed on the soul. People see Pythagoras coming into Kemet. We studied for 20, he said it himself. He studied for 22 years in Kemet. Then he went
We missed all this.
get
I
to
gotta
that.
go back.
Peter's have a key.
It got stuck.
Well, he can see. Now, see, white folks can't explain that. They can't explain that.
that.
It was where after the inundation subsided. That was called earth just and true. As you see, St. Peter's with that Zania taking the gold at one time we measured because it was in our.
That's what I wanted to show you. See? The Ankh. You see it? And the Digit of Asar. This is how far this goes back. So ancient. You can see the black faces to show you the authenticity of us melanated people being the builders of ancient Kemet. And you can see the scale of Ma'at that's now is the scale that they use in their court system. It's plagiarized also from us.
In Africa. Rightfully belongs
The
to us.
Digit with the 4 chakra centers on top.
Measured everything.
This is
Even
where
the
Asar
soul, the
sits.
heart, was weighed on the scale, on the balance. You had to come before Tahuti thought, and your heart had to be just and true. As you see St. Peter's, we're not going to get into that today, but you see the key of life. Didn't St. Peter's have a key? Well, here you can see the key of life where the deceased is coming before the scales, before Osiris, where the heart is being weighed against the feather of truth. They weighed everything. Everything was dealing with mathematics and science. So we move on. We can see here at the great temple of Amun and Karnak, going all the way back in its foundation.
See, you're not going to go back and find all these mathematical equations on the wall and all this old ancient Kemet stuff. Like I said, equilateral at the cross, you see that, no pedophile stuff, equilateral. You understand? This is old mathematics right here. So it's not China, none of that shit. It was us black melanated people getting the knowledge from the sunlight. Okay, we the oldest people on this earth, no beginning, no end. Alright? So you're not going to look at all this and give me your little lily whitewashed ass sketches of Jesus as my God, when our God, the Son, had us come out here and painstakingly put this work down in stone. So it always be around. So if you're talking about a Bible in stone, you looking at them when you look at these reliefs all over ancient Kemet and all over the planet that we left all over. So we ain't got no time to listen to nobody else bullshit.
In the 12th dynastic period, all the way through the New Kingdom, all the way up to the present, we can still go, as I did and took this picture. You can see Roman numerals before the Romans. Here you can see the area of a circle. How many of you knew that they were involved in the area of mathematics? How many of you knew that? The area of a circle. Look at the Orion mathematical papyrus here. The area of the circle. The area of a square.